everybody, welcome to my channel. This is Makeup by Mackenzie and I'm Mackenzie, obviously. Today we're going to be starting a new series that I have planned to do on my channel called Makeup 101. Basically in this series we'll be working through each of the steps of creating a perfect makeup look. By the end of all of this you'll be a complete master of all of the basics. So some of this may sound like rules, and by the end of this you'll probably be thinking, but Mackenzie, you always say makeup has no rules. Well, that's true. It doesn't. They're more like guidelines. But you have to know the rules before you can break them. If you're a lawyer, you have to know the laws before you can change them, right? So what I say for makeup is master the basics, master these guidelines, and then you can experiment with breaking the rules, experimenting with new colors and shapes and trying different things. So master the basics first, and that is what this is for. Today we're going to be talking about primer, foundation, and concealer. Basically, the perfect base for the perfect makeup look. So let's play with some makeup, shall we? Alright, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is primer. And what is a face primer? Well, it's kind of like paint primer. You're basically creating the perfect base for your foundation and for your concealer so that everything looks seamless. Primers typically combat shine, refine your pores, they create a smooth base for your foundation, and they make your foundation last longer. But you can get different things with different primers. For example, if you have oily skin, you're probably going to want one that is specifically designed to combat the shine on your face from the oil. If you have dry skin, you're probably going to want one that has some sort of hydrating factor to it. If you have redness in your skin, you might want one that is green tinted that combats and cancels out the redness. So you can kind of pick and choose based on your skin type. Well, let's talk about something that's really important to making sure that your foundation and your primer are compatible. You want them to be compatible so you have this very seamless, natural look, and it helps with the longevity of your foundation. There are two basic types of primer: water-based primer and silicone-based primer. The same thing goes for foundation. There are silicone-based foundations and there are water-based foundations, and you want your foundation and your primer to be compatible. You want them to be the same base. For example, the NYX Angel Veil primer is a silicone-based primer. The L'Oreal Infallible Total Cover Foundation is a silicone-based foundation. So these two are compatible. The Wet n Wild Photo Focus Face Primer is compatible with the L'Oreal Infallible Pro Glow because they are both water-based primers and foundations. So these are compatible. How can you tell if something is water-based or silicone-based? That's actually really easy. For example, on the back, if you look in the ingredients, if within the first few ingredients it has any ingredient that ends in cone, like dimethicone, that means it is a silicone-based primer. If none of the first few ingredients end in cone, then it is a water-based primer. The same goes for foundation and concealer. When you're layering your concealer over the top of your foundation, the whole silicone or water-based thing doesn't really matter. If you're skipping the foundation step and just putting on concealer over your primer, that's when it matters, and that's when you should look to see if your concealer is water or silicone-based. Some good options of some silicone-based primers are the NYX Angel Veil, like I mentioned before, and then Benefit's Porefessional Primer. Some good options for some water-based primers are the one I mentioned previously, the Wet n Wild Photo Focus Primer, or the Tarte Clean Slate Primer. To apply a primer, it's very easy. You just use your fingers, and you just put a little bit on your finger. And you start from the center of your face. I'm just going to put a dab on my forehead. And then you start from the center of your face and blend out. And today I used the Wet n Wild Photo Focus. So that's water-based, so that means my foundation needs to be water-based. Let's talk about foundation for a little bit. You're going to hear a few different terms when it comes to foundation, and the first I want to talk about is coverage. Foundations usually come in three different coverages. First is sheer, medium, full coverage foundation. Sheer coverage means that you can still see your skin's natural tone, texture, like if you have freckles, you should probably still see the freckles. It will cover very minor imperfections. Full coverage means that you can't see anything. You're basically putting an entire blank slate on your face. Full coverage foundations are very opaque. You won't be able to see any of your skin's natural tone and texture through a full coverage foundation. Medium is exactly what it sounds like. It's somewhere in between sheer and full coverage. When it comes to coverage, you're also going to hear the term buildable a lot. What buildable means is you have a sheer or medium coverage foundation that you can easily add layers on top of layers in order to create a fuller coverage that you want without the foundation looking cakey, which that means without it looking like you have tons and tons of makeup on. The next thing you're going to hear is something called finish, which basically finish is kind of like when you're talking about painting a wall. You have things like glossy or matte or eggshell or whatever. That's basically the same thing here. You're going to have 3 different types of finishes. Dewy finish, a natural or satin finish, or you're going to have a matte finish. And they're exactly what they sound like. Dewy means that it's very wet looking, it's glowy, it's shiny. Natural or satin means that it looks closely like your skin's natural finish. So it's somewhere between a shiny and a matte finish. And matte means that it has no shine whatsoever. So dewy tends to be better for people who have drier skin who want to add some shine back into their skin. Matte is best for people who have oily skin who want to get rid of any shine on their face. However, coverage and finish are very personal, so you do what you like on your skin. Let's talk about picking the perfect shade of foundation, and that can be very tricky, especially in the drugstore where you can't try on foundations. If you do have the opportunity to try on a foundation, basically just take a little bit on your finger and put it right here on your neck. And you want your foundation to disappear. You do not want to be able to see something that's lighter or darker than your skin tone. You also want to look at that color in natural light. You do not want to look at it in fluorescent light, in studio lighting, whatever. So if you're at a store and it has windows, take the foundation bottle over to the window. Take your phone out, take a mirror out, whatever, and look at it in comparison to your skin tone, and look at that swatch you did in comparison to your skin tone. If you're in a store that doesn't have the opportunity to try on the foundation, or you're really not sure about whether the color matches you or not, buy the shade you think is closest to your skin tone, then buy a shade lighter and a shade darker. You can always return the ones that don't match your skin tone. Yes, even if they are open, most stores will still allow you to return used or open products. Let's talk about BB creams. What is a BB cream? You have probably heard that name tossed around so many different times. BB stands for Beauty Balm, and BB creams are basically in between of a tinted moisturizer and a foundation. They offer less coverage and they're less heavy than a foundation, but they offer you more than a tinted moisturizer. BB creams tend to be sheer to medium coverage, so they cover things like minor imperfections and redness. They also typically boast things like hydration, brightening. They usually have some kind of SPF. I'm going to use the BB cream from Maybelline as an example. This is the Dream BB Fresh, and it says that it blurs imperfections, enhances, brightens, adjusts to skin tone, smooths, hydrates, and has SPF 30 in it. So that's a typical BB cream. Most BB creams will say stuff like this, that they offer that to you. BB creams come in dewy and natural finish. You're going to be very hard pressed to find a BB cream that is matte finish. So for that reason, it tends to be better for people with drier skin. However, that doesn't mean that somebody with oily skin wouldn't like a BB cream. It does offer very light coverage compared to a foundation. So it is kind of a nice everyday option. Let's talk about something that can get a little bit complicated and kind of frustrating, and that is application. There are so many different opinions and so many different tools for application. I mean, you've got beauty blenders, Silica sponges, flat brushes, buffing brushes, artiste brushes, stippling brushes, kabuki brushes. Like, there's so many different brushes. Let's just clear that all away and get back to some basics. Let's talk about brush versus sponge. A brush and a sponge have their own pros and cons. For example, this is just a basic flat brush from Real Techniques. They call it their Essential Foundation Brush. This is just a synthetic bristle brush that is perfect for applying foundation to your face. Brushes offer precision and they offer saturation. It is really easy to get a lot of foundation on really fast and also get full coverage with a brush. However, it's really hard not to get streaks on your face with a brush. That's where the Beauty Blender shines. The Beauty Blender is great for getting seamless, blended out foundation. However, a beauty sponge tends to absorb more of the product than a brush does. So really, it's just personal preference. Do you like a brush? Do you like a sponge? For me personally, I like a sponge. When you're applying with the Beauty Blender, or this is the Real Technique sponge that really needs to be washed, you want it to be damp. You do not want to apply with a dry sponge. You should be making your beauty sponge damp. So that basically just means soaking it in water and then squeezing it all out like you would with a normal sponge. So I'm going to go ahead and go do that. Now that my sponge is damp, it's much softer and much more pliable. It's also a little bit bigger. So let's start with application of our foundation. And I'm actually going to use the Yadah BB cream just simply because I prefer a BB cream for every day rather than foundation. But that's, again, my personal preference. If you want to do a foundation, great. If you're a full coverage queen, great, do that. I personally am going to use the BB cream. So when I'm applying any foundation, whether it's a BB cream or a foundation, I just apply a little bit on my finger and I go section by section. So I just take a little bit, put it around in different spots. Then I just take my beauty sponge and I start bouncing it on the face, moving it around while bouncing and blending in that foundation. Alright, and then I just move on to the next section. And I forgot to mention that this BB cream has no silicone ingredients in it, so it is water-based. So that's why I paired it with the Wet n Wild primer, because it is a water-based primer with a water-based foundation. The last thing you want to do before you're done with foundation is take some and blend it down your neck, because the last thing you want is a line right here. Take some, put it on your neck. If you're going to have your hair pulled back for whatever look you're doing, or if you have shorter hair, you want to make sure you get your ears, because the last thing you want, again, is a line right there. So just take whatever excess is on your sponge and go over your ears. When you're all blended and done and you look like a ghost, now it is time to move on to concealer. Your concealer should typically be 1 to 2 shades lighter than your foundation. And it should be something that doesn't crease, that doesn't move. It also should be brightening, which typically if it's a 1 or 2 shades lighter than your skin tone, it should do just that. And basically the thing you need to know with concealer is how to apply it to your face. So I'm using the Maybelline Fit Me in the shade Fair, and this is about 1 shade lighter than my skin tone. The best way to apply concealer is in the places where you want to highlight or the places where you want to conceal. I have dark under eye circles, so I want to cover and brighten my under eyes. So to do that, I'm going to apply my concealer in a triangle shape, like that. And that, when I blend it out, will direct light up to my under eyes, making my under eyes brighter. Then I will go over any blemishes or any other places where I have redness, as well as any places where I want to highlight. So for example, I'm going to put a little bit on my chin, a little bit on the corners of my nose, down the bridge of my nose, in my smile lines. Then I like to do a little sunburst kind of pattern right on my forehead, like that. And then I look around to see if there's any other places that I want a little bit more coverage. Then I take my beauty blender or my beauty sponge and do the same thing, but I keep it concentrated in that area. I don't try and move it around as much as I do with my foundation. So now that we've done our concealer, we're completely done with the base of our makeup. And all that's left is to set with setting powder. So that's it for this episode of Makeup 101. I really hope this was helpful to you guys, and I hope I gave you some great tips on how to apply primer, foundation, and concealer, and how to find the products that are best for you. If you have any tips or tricks or hacks or whatever for applying foundation, primer, or concealer, please share them down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I'd also love to hear if you have any favorite primers, foundations, or concealers. What are your holy grail products? Alright guys, remember, makeup has no rules. There are more like guidelines. So, you do you, boo-boo. Alright, see you next time, everyone. Cherophobia is the fear of happiness. Interesting. Alrighty, let's get started. Different types of alright, now that my beauty blender, the L'Oreal Total Cover or the Tarte Clean shade. I really hope this was helpful. Ooh, that's really bright now. To